The rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows of the two-story house on Maple Street, a quiet corner of suburban Chicago where the streetlights flickered like tired sentinels. Inside, the living room glowed dimly under the weight of a single lamp, its amber light casting long shadows across the worn leather couch. John sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the coffee table where a half-empty mug sat forgotten. His hands, calloused from years of tinkering with numbers and fixing things. Bikes, shelves, broken dreams, clenched tight, as if holding on to something slipping away. 16 years. 16 years of raising Emily, of late-night fevers and early morning school runs. And now, tonight, it all felt like a lie. The stairs creaked, a sound he knew too well. He didn't need to look up to know it was her. Emily, sneaking back in, thinking she could glide past him like a ghost. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second a small accusation. She'd been out again, probably with those kids he didn't trust. Teenagers with sharp tongues and sharper secrets. John's jaw tightened as the front door clicked shut, soft but not soft enough. He stood, arms crossing over his chest, and waited in the doorway between the living room and the hall. The air was heavy, thick with the unspoken tension that had been building for months. "Emily," he said, his voice low but firm, cutting through the quiet. She froze halfway up the stairs, her sneakers squeaking against the wood. Her silhouette was all defiance. Hoodie slung low, hair spilling out from under the hood, one hand gripping the banister like she was ready to bolt. She didn't turn around, not at first. "Where were you?" She spun then, her eyes flashing in the dim light, all teenage fire and venom. "None of your business," she snapped, tossing her backpack onto the floor with a thud. It landed near the couch where Claire sat, her hands folded in her lap, her face half hidden in the shadows. Emily's voice carried an edge John hadn't heard before, something colder than her usual rebellion. "You're not the boss of me." John stepped forward, his boots heavy on the hardwood. "While you're under my roof, I am." His words were measured, but inside he was unraveling. He'd caught her sneaking out 3 times this month, each time a little bolder, a little less apologetic. He didn't know where she went, who she saw, but he knew it wasn't just teenage antics. Something was pulling her away from him, something he couldn't name. "You don't get to disappear and not tell me where you're going." Emily's face twisted, her lips curling into a sneer that cut deeper than he expected. She took a step down, her hands balling into fists. "You don't get it, do you?" Her voice cracked, but not with tears, with anger, raw and unfiltered. "You're not even my real dad. My other dad is better than you. Way better." The words landed like a fist to his chest, knocking the air out of him. The room went still, the rain outside fading to a distant hum. John's eyes locked on Emily, searching for a flicker of regret, a hint that she didn't mean it. But she stood there, chest heaving, her gaze daring him to fight back. "My real dad, other dad." The phrases spun in his head, sharp and jagged, slicing through 16 years of memories. Her first wobbly steps, her gap-toothed grin, the way she'd clung to his hand at the county fair. He'd been there for all of it. If he wasn't her father, then what was he? He turned to Claire, who hadn't moved from the couch. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted, but she said nothing. That silence was a blade, twisting deeper than Emily's words. "Claire," John said, his voice dangerously low. "You gonna explain that?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "Emily, go to your room," she finally muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily smirked, a victor's smile, and stormed upstairs, her footsteps echoing like gunshots. The door slammed, and the house fell quiet again, save for the rain. John didn't move. His hands clenched, unclenched, then clenched again. He didn't know who he wanted to confront. Emily, Claire, or himself for being so blind. "You gonna explain that?" he repeated, stepping closer to Claire. His shadow loomed over her, and she flinched, but she didn't meet his eyes. "She's just mad, John," Claire said. Her words rushed, unsteady. "You know how kids are." She didn't mean it, but her voice faltered, and she looked away, picking at her sweater like it held the answers. Didn't mean it? John's tone was ice, each word deliberate. Because you didn't exactly jump to correct her. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near growl. Who's this other dad, Claire? What the hell's going on? Claire's shoulders sagged, but she didn't answer. That silence, heavier than any confession, told him more than words ever could. John turned away, his mind racing. An other dad. The phrase clawed at him, unearthing doubts he'd buried years ago. Claire's late nights a decade back, her excuses about friends. The way Emily's eyes, green and piercing, didn't quite match his own. He'd told himself it didn't matter, blood or not, she was his. But now, standing in the wreckage of that moment, he wasn't so sure. He walked to the kitchen, the linoleum cold under his boots, and sank into a chair. The coffee pot sat on the counter, still warm from hours ago. He poured a cup, watched it steam but didn't drink. His mind drifted to a memory, sharp and vivid, from when Emily was 6. They'd been at the park, the one by Lake Michigan, with its rusted swings and gravel paths. She'd begged him to push her higher, her laughter ringing out as the wind whipped her hair. "Daddy, don't stop," she'd squealed, her tiny hands gripping the chains. He'd pushed until his arms ached, until the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange. That girl, that Emily, was gone. The man who'd pushed her swings? He didn't know where he'd gone either. At 2 a.m., he heard her voice, soft and muffled, drifting from her room. The door was cracked open, just enough for him to catch the words. "Yeah, I told him," Emily whispered into her phone, her tone proud, almost gleeful. "He doesn't even know what to do. You're so much cooler than him, Dad." "Dad." She said it again, and it wasn't John she was talking to. His stomach twisted, bile rising in his throat. He edged closer, peering through the gap. Emily was curled on her bed, phone glowing against her face, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at him in years. "I can't wait to meet you for real," she added. "Soon, okay?" John stepped back, his heart pounding. Whoever this Mike was, Emily believed he was her father, and he was close enough to meet. John didn't know his name, his face, nothing. But he knew one thing. This man had gotten into her head, and she just kicked John out of it. The rain kept falling, a relentless drumbeat against the house, as something inside him shifted. Something hard, something cold. They didn't know it yet, but Emily and Claire had just lit a fuse. And whatever came next, they weren't ready for it. If the story's hitting you as hard as it's hitting me, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more. Drop a comment with your city, we might just give you a shout out in our next tale. Speaking of, a big thanks to Lisa Carter from Seattle for the love. Stick with us because this is just the beginning. John didn't sleep that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the house on Maple Street cloaked in a damp, restless quiet. He sat at the kitchen table, the cold coffee from hours ago still untouched, its surface reflecting the faint glow of the overhead light. His laptop hummed softly, the only sound in the room, as he stared at the screen. Emily's words looped in his mind, relentless, each syllable a fresh wound. "You're not even my real dad. My other dad is better." He didn't know who this other dad was, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to sit here and let some stranger steal his daughter. Not without a fight. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., and the house felt like a stranger's. John's eyes burned, but he didn't blink, didn't move. He thought of Emily's smile from that phone call, the way it had lit up her face in a way he hadn't seen in years. Whoever this Mike was, he'd gotten under her skin, and John needed to know how. He needed to know why. He opened a browser, his fingers hovering over the keys, then typed Emily phone records into the search bar. Their family plan had an online portal, one he'd never bothered to check before. Now it was a lifeline. The login took 3 tries. His hands were shaking, his mind foggy with exhaustion and rage. When the dashboard loaded, he scrolled through Emily's call logs, his heart pounding as he scanned the numbers. There it was, a single number repeated half a dozen times over the past month, always late at night, always when John was asleep or at work. He copied it, ran it through a reverse lookup site, the kind he used to track down shady clients at his accounting firm. The result came back empty, just a prepaid burner phone, untraceable. John's jaw clenched. Legit people didn't use burners. This Mike, whoever he was hiding something. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes, and let his mind drift to the past. 10 years ago, things with Claire had been rough. He'd been working late, buried in spreadsheets, while she'd been out with friends more nights than he could count. There'd been a receipt once, tucked in her purse, for a dinner for two at a place they'd never gone together. He'd asked about it, and she'd laughed, said it was a coworker's birthday. He'd believed her because he had to, because Emily was his world, and doubting Claire meant doubting everything. Now, though, the memory felt different, sharper, like a puzzle piece he'd ignored too long. The next morning, Claire was in the kitchen, moving like nothing had happened. She flipped pancakes, the smell of butter and syrup filling the air, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured orange juice. Emily came down, grabbed a plate, and didn't look at John. Her hoodie was up, earbuds in, shutting him out as effectively as a locked door. John sat at the table, his laptop closed, watching them both. Claire avoided his eyes, chattering about her day at the hospital, her voice too bright, too forced. Emily ate in silence, then left without a word, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The front door clicked shut, and John felt the weight of the empty house settle around him. "You gonna talk about last night?" he asked, his voice cutting through Claire's nervous small talk. She froze, the spatula hovering over the pan, then set it down slowly. Her shoulders slumped, but she didn't turn around. "She's just a kid, John," Claire said, her voice soft, pleading. "She's angry. You know how teenagers are." John stood, his chair scraping against the linoleum. "That's not what I asked." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "She said I'm not her dad. She's got some other guy she's calling dad. And you sat there, Claire. You didn't say a damn thing to stop her." Claire turned then, her eyes red, her lips trembling. "I didn't know what to say," she whispered. "She caught me off guard." "Caught you off guard?" John's voice rose, sharp and unforgiving. 16 years, Claire. I've been there for every fever, every school play, every fight over homework. And you let her stand there and say I'm nothing to her. Why?" Claire's hands twisted together, her knuckles white. She looked down, her voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something. About before." John's stomach dropped, but he didn't move. He'd felt this moment coming, a shadow he'd ignored for years. "Go on," he said, his tone flat, bracing for the blow. She took a shaky breath, her eyes fixed on the floor. 10 years ago, when things were bad between us, I was lonely. You were always working, and I messed up. There was someone else just for a few weeks. His name was David. But Emily's yours, John. I swear she's yours." The name, David, hit like a punch, but it was her hesitation that cut deeper. John's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Then why's she calling some guy dad?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "Why'd you let her believe I'm not?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away this time. "I was mad. We'd had that fight, remember? About money, about everything. I threw it in your face once, said maybe she wasn't yours. I didn't mean it, but Emily overheard. She was so little I thought she'd forget. But she didn't. She started asking questions, and I let it sit there. I didn't correct her." John stared at her, the woman he'd built a life with, and felt nothing but cold. She'd planted that seed, let it grow, let it choke him out. "You let her think I'm a lie," he said, each word deliberate. "For years." "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't think it'd go this far. Please, John, talk to her. She needs you." "She doesn't want me," John snapped, turning away. "She's got her other dad now, and you let it happen." He walked out of the kitchen, his boots heavy on the floor, leaving Claire standing there, her sobs muffled by the hum of the refrigerator. That night, John waited. Emily had been texting nonstop, her phone buzzing like a live wire. He'd seen her sneaking glances at it, her face lighting up with a secret he wasn't part of. When she slipped out at 9 p.m., claiming she was meeting friends, John didn't stop her. Instead, he grabbed his keys and followed, his truck trailing her bus through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. The city lights blurred outside his windshield, neon signs and skyscrapers giving way to the grittier edges of downtown. Emily got off near a dive bar, its neon sign buzzing faintly, and John parked across the street, his heart pounding. She checked her phone, then walked toward a man leaning against a wall. He was tall, lean, with a leather jacket and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mike. John couldn't hear them, but he didn't need to. Emily lit up, bouncing on her toes like a kid meeting her hero. The man said something, and she laughed loud and free, a sound John hadn't heard from her in years. He handed her a soda, his hand lingering on her arm, his eyes flicking over her in a way that made John's grip tighten on the steering wheel. It wasn't fatherly. It was predatory. They talked for 10 minutes, maybe less. Mike showed her something on his phone, and Emily gasped, throwing her arms around him. He grinned, a sharp, calculating smile, and John's blood ran cold. She left after that, heading back to the bus stop, but Mike stayed, pulling out his phone and pacing as he made a call. John waited, his truck idling, until Mike disappeared into the night. He didn't follow. He'd seen enough. Mike was real, he was here, and he had Emily hooked. Back home, John sat in his office, a cramped room at the back of the house where he kept his files and a bottle of whiskey he rarely touched. The laptop screen glowed, casting harsh light across his face as he dug deeper. He cross-referenced the burner number, found a forum post about a Mike who'd conned a family out of thousands, promising their daughter a modeling gig. A news article from 3 years back confirmed it. Michael Tate, small-time con artist, arrested for fraud. The mugshot showed the same sharp smile John had seen outside the bar. His hand shook as he saved the photo. Emily could hate him all she wanted, but he wasn't letting her walk into a trap. If the story's gripping you like it's gripping me, hit that subscribe button and join the community. Drop a comment with your city, we might shout you out next time. Big thanks to Marcus Lee from Miami for the support. Stick around because things are about to get wilder. The Chicago skyline glittered in the distance, its lights cutting through the early morning fog like a promise John no longer believed in. He sat in his truck, parked outside a diner on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the coffee was bitter and the booths smelled of grease and regret. The mugshot of Michael Tate stared back at him from his laptop. That sharp, predatory smile burned into his memory. John's fingers traced the edge of the screen, his mind racing. Mike wasn't just a voice on Emily's phone anymore. He was a threat, flesh and blood, and John was done waiting for answers. He was going to end this. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a red glow across the dashboard. John had spent the last 2 days digging, piecing together Mike's trail like he would a client's hidden accounts. The forum posts, the news article, the burner phone, they all pointed to a man who thrived on lies, preying on trust like a vulture. Emily was his latest mark, and John's gut told him she wasn't just a target for admiration. Guys like Mike didn't stop at flattery. They took money, dreams, futures, and left wreckage behind. John wasn't going to let that happen. Not to Emily. Not even now, when she'd made it clear he was nothing to her. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Tom, a coworker from the firm, picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy but warm. John? Man, it's been forever. You okay? John didn't waste time on pleasantries. Need a favor, Tom. Your cousin's still on the force. There was a pause. Then Tom's tone sharpened. Yeah, why? What's going on? John kept it vague, just enough to hook him. Some creep's messing with my kid. I've got evidence, but I need someone to listen. Tom didn't ask questions. By noon, John had a name, Detective Laura Harris, and a promise she'd meet him if he had proof. He hung up, his hands steady for the first time in days. The plan was forming, rough but solid. He just needed Mike to take the bait. Back at the house, the air was thick with tension. Claire was in the living room, folding laundry with mechanical precision, her eyes red and puffy. Emily hadn't come down all morning, her door locked, music blaring through the walls. John stood in the doorway, watching Claire's hands move, her silence louder than any argument. He'd avoided her since their last fight, since she'd admitted to planting the seed that turned Emily against him. But he couldn't avoid her now. Not when he needed answers. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, cutting through the hum of the TV. Claire's hands stilled, a folded towel slipping from her grip. She looked up, her face pale, and nodded. They moved to the kitchen, the same table where John had sat through too many sleepless nights. He didn't sit this time. He stood, arms crossed, his shadow looming over her. "What do you know about this Mike?" he asked, his tone flat but edged with steel. Claire's eyes darted away, her fingers twisting together. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just what Emily said. She thinks he's her dad." John leaned in, his voice dropping. "Don't lie to me, Claire. Not now." He pulled out his phone, showed her the mugshot. "This is him, Michael Tate.
Con artist.
Arrested for fraud. He's got Emily wrapped around his finger, and you're acting like it's nothing. What aren't you telling me?" Claire's breath hitched, her hands trembling. She looked at the photo, then away, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. John's patience snapped. "Damn it, Claire, talk." His fist hit the table, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. She flinched, tears welling up, and finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "A few months ago, I was looking through old photos, and I got curious about David. I wanted to know if he'd left anything behind, for Emily's sake. I found Mike online, thought he might know something. We talked a few times. He seemed nice, said he knew David, said he'd met Emily once when she was little. I didn't know he was this." She gestured at the mugshot, her hand shaking. "I told him about her, about how she's been struggling. He said he wanted to help." John's blood ran cold. "You gave him her number?" His voice was a growl, each word heavy with disbelief. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know, John. I thought he was a friend. I didn't think I didn't think." "You didn't think?" John stepped back, his hands clenching into fists. "You let a stranger into her life, Claire. You let him play her, let her call him dad. And you didn't tell me?" His voice cracked, not with anger but with something deeper. Betrayal, raw and jagged. Claire had been his partner, his anchor, and now she was part of the lie tearing his family apart. He turned away, unable to look at her, his mind reeling. Claire wasn't just complicit in the past. She'd opened the door for Mike, handed him the keys to Emily's trust. He left her there, her sobs fading as he climbed the stairs. Emily's door was still shut, the music louder now, a pulsing beat that drowned out the world. John stood outside, his hand hovering over the knob. He wanted to barge in, shake her awake, make her see the truth. But he knew she wouldn't listen. Not yet. Instead, he pressed his ear to the door, catching fragments of her voice over the music. "I know, I miss you," she was saying, her tone soft, eager. "School's stupid anyway. When can I see you again?" Pause, then a laugh. "Yeah, he doesn't care anymore. You're so much better." John's heart sank, the words cutting deeper than he thought possible. She was talking to Mike, and she sounded happy. Happier than she'd ever been with him. He backed away, his boots silent on the carpet, and retreated to his office. The whiskey bottle sat on the shelf, tempting, but he ignored it. He needed a clear head. Mike wasn't just a con man. He was a predator, and Claire had let him in. Emily was slipping away, and John was running out of time. The next day, he drove to a coffee shop in the Loop, the heart of Chicago where the L trains rumbled overhead and the streets buzzed with life. The place was old, its formica tables scratched and its walls lined with faded photos of the city's past. John sat in a corner booth, a recorder in his pocket, a cheap device he'd bought for work meetings, now his weapon. He sipped black coffee, its bitterness grounding him, and dialed Mike's number. The line rang twice before that smooth, cocky voice answered. "Yeah, this is John," he said, keeping his tone flat. "Emily's father." The word felt like ash in his mouth, but he forced it out. A pause, then a low chuckle. "Oh hey man, she's told me about you. What's up? I know what you're doing. John cut in, his voice steady. And I want her gone. She's not mine, she's yours now. How much to make that happen? Mike didn't hesitate, his tone shifting to business. Straight to the point, huh? I like that. 5 grand, cash. She's worth it, right? John's stomach turned, but he kept his voice even. Fine. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. parking lot behind the warehouse on 5th. Bring her if you want. I don't care. Deal, Mike said, and hung up. Too easy. He thought he'd won. Thought John was a desperate fool ready to pay him off. Perfect. John met Detective Harris that afternoon. Her no-nonsense demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos in his head. She listened to his story, her eyes narrowing at the mention of Mike's record. Get him talking, she said, tapping the recorder. We'll be there. John nodded, the weight of the plan settling on his shoulders. He was ready, but he needed one more thing. He needed Emily to know. That evening, he knocked on her door, the music quieter now. Emily, he called, his voice softer than he meant it to be. The door opened a crack, and she stood there, her eyes guarded, her arms crossed. What? John took a breath, searching for the right words. I know about Mike, he said. He's not who you think he is. He's dangerous, Emily. He's using you. Her face hardened, her lips curling into a sneer. You're just jealous, she spat. You can't stand that I have someone better. He cares about me. You don't. She slammed the door, the sound echoing through the house. John stood there, the rejection stinging, but it only steeled his resolve. She'd see the truth tomorrow, one way or another. He walked downstairs, the recorder heavy in his pocket. The city outside was alive, its lights flickering through the windows, but John felt alone. Claire had betrayed him, Emily had rejected him, and Mike was closing in. But John wasn't done. Not yet. He'd save her, even if she hated him for it. And then he'd walk away. If the story's pulling you in, smash that subscribe button and join us for the next chapter. Tell us your city in the comments, we might give you a shout out. A huge thanks to Sarah Thompson from Denver for the love. Stick with us, because the storm's just beginning. When he showed her the mugshot and explained Mike's history. Her office, tucked in a precinct near the Chicago River, smelled of stale coffee and ink, its walls plastered with wanted posters and faded maps. You've got a good instinct, Harris said, leaning back in her chair, her pen tapping the desk. Tate's got warrants in 2 states, fraud, identity theft, you name it. If you can get him talking, get it on tape, we'll have him. She slid a card across the desk, her eyes steady. But don't play hero, John. Guys like him don't go down easy. John nodded, pocketing the card, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't doing this to be a hero. He wasn't even sure he was doing it for Emily anymore. This was about proving something, to himself, to the man he'd been before Emily's words tore him apart. As he left the precinct, the wind off the river cut through his jacket, sharp and cold, like the truth he was chasing. The city stretched out before him, its skyscrapers glinting under a gray sky, but all John could see was Emily's face, that smile she'd given Mike, the one she'd never given him. Back home, the house was a battlefield of silence. Claire was in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with a ferocity that betrayed her guilt. Emily's music still pulsed through the walls, a barrier John couldn't cross. He stood at the foot of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister, and made a decision. He couldn't wait for her to come to him. Not this time. He climbed the steps, each one heavier than the last, and knocked on her door. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by a tense quiet. Emily, he said, his voice steady but softer than he'd planned. We need to talk. The door cracked open, just enough for him to see her face. Eyes narrowed, lips set in a hard line. What do you want? She asked, her tone dripping with defiance. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her hoodie swallowing her frame. Behind her, the room was a mess of clothes and posters, a teenage sanctuary John no longer belonged in. He took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. I know about Mike, he said, watching her reaction. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't flinch. He's not who you think he is, Emily. He's a liar. Conman. He's using you. Emily's laugh was sharp, cutting. Using me? That's rich. Coming from you. She stepped forward, her voice rising. You don't get to tell me who he is. He listens to me. He cares. You? You're just here, acting like you're my dad when you're not. John's chest tightened, her words slicing through him like glass. He wanted to grab her, shake her, make her see the truth, but he saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen when she was 6 and stubborn, refusing to give up on her first bike. I've been your dad for 16 years, he said, his voice low, almost breaking. I've been there for everything, and I'm telling you, this guy's dangerous. You need to stay away from him. Emily's face twisted, a mix of anger and something else. Hurt, maybe, but buried deep. You don't know him, she spat. You don't know me. Just leave me alone. She slammed the door, the sound echoing through the house, leaving John standing there, his hands still raised, his heart pounding. He'd lost her. Maybe he'd lost her years ago, and he'd just been too blind to see it. Downstairs, Claire was waiting, her hands wringing a dish towel like it was her lifeline. Did you talk to her? She asked, her voice small, desperate. John didn't answer. He brushed past her, heading for his office, but her voice followed him. John, please. She's slipping away. We have to fix this. He stopped, turning sharply. There's no we, Claire. His voice was cold, final. You opened the door for him. You let this happen. I'm handling it my way. Claire's face crumpled, but John didn't stay to watch her cry. He locked the office door behind him, the click loud in the quiet house. The recorder sat on his desk, a small, unassuming thing that held the weight of his plan. He checked the battery, his hands steady now, and opened his laptop. Mike's mugshot stared back, that smirk mocking him. John's jaw tightened. Tomorrow night it would be over. The day dragged, each hour a slow burn. Emily left for school, or wherever she went these days, without a word. Claire hovered, her apologies falling on deaf ears. John spent the afternoon preparing, mapping the warehouse lot on 5th Street, a desolate stretch of cracked asphalt and rusted fences where the city seemed to forget itself. He drove there in the evening, the sun sinking low, painting the sky a bruised purple. The lot was empty, save for a few abandoned crates and the distant hum of traffic. He parked in the shadows, testing the recorder, running through the plan in his head. Harris would be there, hidden, waiting for the signal. Mike would talk, and John would make sure every word was caught. As he sat there, the weight of it all settled on him. 16 years of memories. Emily's laughter, her tiny hand in his, the way she'd looked at him like he was her hero, felt like a lifetime ago. Claire's betrayal, Emily's rejection, Mike's lies. They'd stripped him bare, left him a man he barely recognized. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He'd save Emily, not because she wanted him to, but because it was the last thing he could do for the girl he'd raised. After that, he didn't know. The road ahead was dark, uncharted, and for the first time, that didn't scare him. If the story's pulling you in like it's pulling me, smash that subscribe button and join us for more. Tell us your city in the comments, we might give you a shout out next. A huge thanks to Sarah Thompson from Denver for the love. Stay with us because the storm's just starting. The warehouse lot on 5th Street was a forgotten corner of Chicago, where the city's pulse faded to a low hum. Cracked asphalt stretched under a sky heavy with clouds, the air thick with the scent of diesel and rust. John stood in the shadows, his truck parked behind a stack of rotting crates, the recorder in his pocket a small, cold weight against his chest. The clock on his dashboard read 7:50 p.m., and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. He checked the recorder again, its red light steady, ready. Detective Harris was out there, hidden with her team, their presence a faint reassurance in the dark. But John's focus was on the plan, on Mike, on Emily. Tonight it would end. Headlights cut through the gloom, sharp and sudden. A black sedan rolled into the lot, its engine rumbling as it slowed. John's pulse quickened, but he stayed still, his breath shallow. The car stopped, and Mike stepped out, his leather jacket catching the faint glow of a streetlight. He moved with a predator's ease, hands in his pockets. That smirk John had seen in the mugshot plastered across his face. Then the passenger door opened, and Emily climbed out, her hoodie pulled tight, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked smaller here, out of place, her eyes darting nervously between Mike and the empty lot. John's chest tightened. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. John, right? Mike called, his voice smooth, taunting, as he strolled closer. Where's my money? He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning the shadows, but John didn't flinch. He held up a duffel bag, empty but heavy with the illusion of cash, and tossed it at Mike's feet. Right here, John said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. But first, tell me what you're planning. I want her gone for good. Mike's grin widened, a glint of triumph in his eyes. He stepped closer, the recorder catching every word. Oh man, you're making this easy, he said, his tone dripping with confidence. Kid's got dreams, you know? Wants out of this dump. I'll take her off your hands, set her up somewhere nice. She trusts me, thinks I'm her old man. Few months, she'll get me whatever I need. Cash, contacts, maybe more. Then I'm out. Done it before. Works like a charm. Emily froze, her backpack slipping slightly as she stared at Mike. What? Her voice was small, a whisper lost in the vastness of the lot. Mike laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound, and waved her off. Relax, kid, he said, not even looking at her. It's just business. He turned back to John, his smirk unwavering. So, we good? John's hands clenched, but he kept his eyes on Mike. Yeah, he said, his voice low. We're good. He nodded slightly, the signal Harris had been waiting for. The lot erupted in light, headlights flaring, red and blue flashes cutting through the dark as police cars surged forward. Mike spun, swearing, his hands raised as officers swarmed him, cuffs clicking around his wrists. You set me up? He snarled, his voice thick with rage, but John didn't answer. He stood there, motionless, as Harris took the recorder from his pocket, her nod confirming they'd gotten everything. Emily stood rooted to the spot, her face pale, tears streaking down her cheeks. She looked at Mike, now pinned against a squad car, then at John, her eyes wide with shock and something else. Betrayal, but not just for Mike. You knew? She whispered, her voice breaking. You let this happen? John stepped toward her, his hands raised, but she backed away, shaking her head. Emily, he started, his voice soft, pleading. I had to. He was going to hurt you. You didn't trust me, she shouted, her voice raw, echoing across the lot. You never trusted me. You're just like her. Lying, controlling, both of you. She turned, running toward the edge of the lot, where an officer caught her gently, guiding her to a cruiser. John watched, his heart sinking, as she disappeared into the back seat, her sobs muffled by the closing door. Harris clapped a hand on his shoulder. Good work, she said, her voice brisk. Tate's done. We'll take it from here. John nodded, numb, his eyes still on the cruiser. He'd saved her, but it didn't feel like a victory. Felt like the end. Back at the house, Claire was waiting, her face a mask of panic as John walked through the door. The living room was dark, the TV off, the air heavy with the weight of what had happened. Where's Emily? She asked, her voice trembling as she stood, clutching her sweater. What did you do? She's safe, John said, brushing past her, his voice flat. Mike's gone. Cops have him. He headed for the stairs, but Claire grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. John, talk to me, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. We can fix this. I'm sorry, I swear. I didn't know he was. Stop. John turned, his voice sharp, cutting through her words. You let him in, Claire. You gave him Emily and you lied to me for years. There's no fixing this. He pulled free, his eyes cold. I saved her. That's it. I'm done. Claire's knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch, her sobs filling the room. John didn't look back. He climbed the stairs, his steps heavy, and stopped outside Emily's room. The door was shut, her music silent for once. She'd be home soon, Harris had said, But John wouldn't be there when she arrived. He couldn't be. Not anymore. In the garage, he found her guitar, propped against a box of junk, its neck cracked, strings dangling. Emily had smashed it months ago, a fit of rage over some rule he'd set. He'd meant to throw it out, but now he carried it to his workbench, his tools laid out like surgical instruments. The hours blurred. Glue, clamps, new strings, his hands moving with a precision born of years fixing what was broken. It wasn't perfect, but it would play. He tuned it carefully, each note a quiet ache, a goodbye he couldn't say out loud. Back inside, he set the guitar against Emily's door, careful not to let it fall. It wasn't a speech, wasn't a hug. It was all he had left to give. A piece of her he'd fixed, even if he couldn't fix them. He packed a bag in silence, clothes, his laptop, a few files from the office. Claire watched from the hall, her face streaked with tears, but she didn't speak. "Where are you going?" she finally asked, her voice breaking as he zipped the bag. "Somewhere else," John said, slinging the strap over his shoulder. "You'll get the house. Emily needs it. I'll figure the rest out." He walked downstairs, his boots echoing in the quiet. Claire didn't follow. The divorce papers, printed days ago and signed that morning, sat on the kitchen table, a final line drawn. Outside, the night was cold, the stars hidden behind clouds. John climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling to life. He sat there a moment, staring at the house. 16 years of memories, good and bad, tangled in its walls. Emily's first bike ride, Claire's laugh before it all soured, the photo on the mantel he'd turned face down. It wasn't his anymore. He drove off, the city lights fading in the rearview, the road stretching into the unknown. For the first time in years, he felt unburdened, not happy, but free. Emily would find the guitar, he knew. She'd pick it up, run her fingers over the strings, hear the faint notes through her tears. She'd know he'd fixed it, know he'd been there one last time. Claire would stand in the living room, the divorce papers crumpled in her hand, staring at the space he'd left behind. John didn't look back. The city fell away, and it was just him, the road, and whatever came next. The highway stretched out before John, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the Illinois night, its edges blurring under the faint glow of his truck's headlights. Chicago's skyline faded in the rearview, a jagged silhouette swallowed by distance and darkness. The radio was off, the only sound the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rush of a passing car. John's hands gripped the wheel, his knuckles pale, but his eyes were fixed on the road ahead, unblinking, as if he could outrun the weight of the past 16 years. The house on Maple Street, the life he'd built, the family he'd lost. It was all behind him now, and yet it clung to him, heavy as the cold air seeping through the cracked window. He didn't know where he was going. Not really. A motel, maybe, or a friend's couch until he could sort out the next step. The divorce papers were signed, the bag in the backseat packed with just enough to start over. But starting over didn't feel like freedom, not yet. It felt like falling, like the moment a bridge gives way and there's nothing left to hold on to. John's mind drifted, unbidden, to a memory sharper than the rest. Emily, 8 years old, her hair tied back with a scrunchie, sitting cross-legged on the garage floor. He'd been teaching her to tune her first guitar, a second-hand acoustic he'd found at a pawn shop. Her fingers fumbled with the strings, her brow furrowed in concentration, but when she struck a clear chord, her face lit up, brighter than the summer sun. "I did it, Daddy," she'd laughed, throwing her arms around him. He'd held her tight, the scent of her shampoo lingering, and thought, "This is enough. This is everything." The memory stung, a blade twisting in his chest. That girl was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd looked at him with contempt, who'd chosen a con man over the man who'd raised her. John's jaw tightened, his eyes burning, but he didn't cry. He hadn't cried in years, not since his father's funeral, and he wasn't about to start now. The road curved gently, the lights of a gas station flickering in the distance. He could stop, grab a coffee, keep driving until dawn. But what was the point? Wherever he went, Emily's words would follow. "You're not even my real dad." And Claire's betrayal, Her lies, her complicity. They'd follow too. He'd saved Emily, but he hadn't saved them. Maybe he never could. Back at the house, Emily slipped through the front door, her sneakers silent on the hardwood. The police had dropped her off after hours of questions, their voices a blur of procedure and pity. She'd sat in the cruiser, her hoodie pulled tight, staring out the window as the city passed by, Mike's words echoing in her head. It's just business. He'd never been her father, never cared. And John, the man she'd pushed away, the man she'd hurt, had been the one to stop him. Her chest ached, a tangle of anger and shame she couldn't unravel. The house was quiet, too quiet, the air heavy with absence. Claire was downstairs, her sobs faint but unmistakable. But Emily didn't go to her. Not yet. She climbed the stairs, her steps slow, her backpack dragging behind her. Her room was at the end of the hall, its door a familiar shield, but something caught her eye. Propped against the frame was her guitar, the one she'd smashed in a fit of rage months ago, its neck cracked, strings broken. She froze, her breath catching. The wood gleamed faintly, polished, the cracks sealed with care. She knelt, her fingers brushing the strings, and a soft, clear note rang out, piercing the silence. Her eyes widened, tears welling up as she realized what it meant. John had fixed it. John, who she'd rejected, who she'd screamed at, had spent hours piecing it back together. Emily sat back, clutching the guitar to her chest, her sobs shaking her shoulders. She hated him, didn't she? Hated his rules, his quiet stubbornness, the way he always seemed to know what was best. But the guitar told a different story, one she wasn't ready to hear. He'd been there, even when she'd pushed him away, even when she'd chosen a lie over him. She strummed another note, the sound fragile but steady, and for a moment, she saw him. Not the man she'd fought with, but the one who'd pushed her swings, who'd bandaged her scraped knees, who'd never stopped trying. Her tears fell harder, and she whispered, "I'm sorry." To the empty room, knowing he couldn't hear her, knowing it might be too late. Downstairs, Claire stood in the living room, the divorce papers crumpled in her hand. The house felt hollow, its walls echoing with the life that had once filled it. She'd waited for John to come back, hoped he'd change his mind, but the silence told her he was gone. The papers were a final verdict, each signature a cut deeper than she'd expected. She sank onto the couch, her fingers tracing the ink, her mind replaying every mistake. David, the affair, the lie she'd let Emily believe. Mike, the stranger she'd trusted, the one who'd nearly destroyed them all. And John, the man she'd leaned on, the man she'd broken, who'd walked away because she'd given him no reason to stay. She looked at the photo on the mantel, the one John had turned face down weeks ago. She lifted it, her hands trembling, and saw them, John, Emily, herself at the park years ago. Emily's grin was wide, her front teeth missing, her hand clutching John's. Claire's smile was softer, her eyes bright with a hope she barely remembered. And John, his arm around them both, looked like a man who'd found his place in the world. Claire's throat tightened, and she set the photo down, unable to bear it. She'd lost him, and Emily was slipping away too. But maybe, just maybe, she could start again with her daughter. She wiped her eyes, stood, and walked upstairs, pausing outside Emily's door. The faint strum of a guitar drifted through, and Claire's heart lifted, just a fraction. It wasn't much, but it was something. John's truck rolled on, the highway giving way to open fields, the city a distant memory. The lake was out there somewhere, its waters dark and endless under the night sky. He thought of Emily, of the guitar he'd left behind. She'd find it, he was sure. She'd play it, maybe, and hear the notes he'd tuned, the ones he'd poured his heart into. She'd know he'd been there one last time. And Claire, she'd face the wreckage she'd helped create, the papers a map of her mistakes. John didn't hate her, not really. He didn't hate Emily either. He just couldn't carry them anymore. The road curved, and a sign for a rest stop glowed in the distance. John eased off the gas, the truck slowing as he pulled into the lot. He cut the engine, the silence rushing in, and leaned back, his eyes closing. The future was a blank page, unwritten, and for the first time that felt like enough. He wasn't whole, not yet, but he was free. The stars were out now, faint but steady, and John let them guide him into the unknown, 1 mile at a time. A guitar drifted through the door, a single note, soft but clear, cutting through the silence of the house. Claire froze, her hand hovering over the knob, her breath catching in her throat. It was Emily's guitar, the one she destroyed in a fit of anger, the one Claire had assumed was beyond repair. But there it was, alive again, its sound fragile but unmistakable. Claire's eyes stung with tears, and she pressed her forehead against the door, listening as another note followed, then another, a hesitant melody that felt like a confession. Emily was playing, and Claire knew, without seeing, that John had fixed it. John, who'd given everything, who'd walked away because she'd given him no reason to stay. She wanted to knock, to push the door open and hold her daughter, to beg for forgiveness. But she didn't. Not yet. The music was Emily's space, her way of processing the wreckage Claire had helped create. Claire stepped back, her hands trembling, and returned downstairs, the divorce papers still crumpled on the coffee table. She sat, staring at them, the ink blurring through her tears. She'd lost John, and Emily was a stranger behind a locked door. But that guitar, those notes, they were a flicker of hope, a chance to start again. Claire wiped her eyes, her resolve hardening. She'd fight for Emily, even if it took years, even if it meant facing every mistake she'd made. The house was empty, but it wasn't over. Not completely. Miles away, John pulled off the highway, his truck rolling to a stop on a quiet overlook near Lake Michigan. The water stretched out before him, a vast, inky expanse under a sky dusted with stars. The air was sharp, carrying the faint tang of the lake, and John stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. He leaned against the hood, the metal cold under his hands, and let the silence settle around him. Chicago's lights glowed faintly on the horizon, a reminder of the life he'd left behind. He didn't regret it, not exactly, but the ache was there, a hollow space where Emily's laughter used to be. His mind drifted again, to a moment he hadn't thought of in years. Emily, maybe 10, sitting on the porch steps with a popsicle, her face smeared with grape juice. It was summer, the kind of sticky, endless day that felt like it would last forever. She'd been quiet, her knees drawn up, watching fireflies blink in the yard. "Daddy," she'd said, her voice small, "are you ever gonna leave?" John had knelt beside her, surprised, and brushed a sticky strand of hair from her face. "Never," he'd promised, his voice firm. "I'm right here, kiddo. Always." She'd smiled, her eyes trusting, and leaned into him, her head heavy against his shoulder. That promise, so easy then, felt like a lie now, but not because he'd wanted it to be. John's throat tightened, and he looked out at the lake, its surface rippling under the starlight. He'd kept his promise as long as he could, through Claire's lies, through Emily's rejection, through the shadow of a man named David he'd never known. He'd saved her from Mike, given her the truth, given her the guitar. It wasn't enough to fix them, but it was enough to let him go. The road ahead was his now, uncharted, and for the first time he felt ready to face it. Not whole, not healed, but unburdened. A man who'd done what he could and chosen himself at last. Back in the house, Emily sat on her bed, the guitar across her lap, her fingers still on the strings. The notes had stopped, but the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the weight of what she'd lost, what she'd pushed away. She traced the repaired cracks in the wood, her tears drying on her cheeks. John was gone. She'd heard Claire's sobs, seen the packed bag, the empty office. Part of her wanted to hate him, to cling to the anger that had kept her safe, but the guitar wouldn't let her. It was proof undeniable that he'd cared, even when she'd given him every reason not to. She strummed once more, a single chord, and closed her eyes, picturing his hands. Steady, calloused, patient, fixing what she'd broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice softer now, a seed of something new taking root in the quiet. Claire stood at the living room window, the divorce papers tucked away in a drawer, out of sight but not forgotten. The street outside was dark, the neighbors' lights dim, but she didn't feel alone. Not entirely. Upstairs, Emily's guitar had fallen silent, but Claire held onto the sound, a fragile thread connecting them. She'd start tomorrow, small steps, listening, being there, earning back the trust she'd shattered. The house was hers now, hers and Emily's, and she'd make it a home again, somehow. John climbed back into his truck, the lake at his back, the highway calling. He didn't look at the city again. The engine roared to life, and he drove, the stars above him sharp and endless. The future was uncertain, a blank page, but it was his to write. Emily would find her way with or without him. Claire would too. And John, for the first time in years, would find his.